It's as close to time travel as we're gonna get. This Week in Music History with Marty Miller.
Hello. This is the little podcast that runs through a week in time and stuffs you full of facts and bits and pieces of what went on in the world of music, but back in time, history. This week we're looking at October 14th to 18th. This was the week that Bono of U2 was apologising in 2014.
I'm sorry about that. I had this beautiful idea. I got carried away with ourselves. Artists are prone to that kind of thing.
Do you remember why? And it was the end of an institution in 2006. Blondie drummer Clem Burke remembering CBGBs.
The great thing to do, like when we were in Europe, we would call collect. You know, we reverse charges to the payphone at CBs.
Yeah. And in 2005, Freddie Mercury's precious Rolls Royce fails to sell at auction.
Freddie upstaged everybody by arriving in his brand new roller, which we also felt he couldn't probably afford.
Zipping through a week in a matter of minutes. This Week in Music History, the podcast.
1977 is where we'll start, and David Bowie released his 12th studio album, Heroes, the second installment of his Berlin trilogy with Brian Eno. The other albums were Low and Lodger. Here's David recalling his time there.
I had an apartment there above an auto shop on the Hauptstrasse. I went back to see it on the last tour, and I really got pangs of... It really became a home for me, Berlin, at that time. It was a good place to be. I enjoyed it because there seemed to be such a lot happening in Berlin at the time.
This week in 1988, Def Leppard became the first act in chart history to sell 7 million copies of 2 consecutive albums. Pyromania was the first one, and then Hysteria. Here's Joe Elliott.
Hysteria took 3 years to make. Well, did it really? We started writing the album in February of 1984, and it was released in August of 1987, so you could say it was actually even longer. But the fact is that we didn't start recording until August of 84. That was with a guy called Jim Steinman, and all those sessions were scrapped. So the actual record that you hear didn't really get recorded until mid-85. So, truth is, the album actually that you listen to when you hear the album Hysteria took about 18 months to record.
In 1995, this week, Paul and Linda McCartney were guest voices on The Simpsons in an episode called Lisa the Vegetarian. Now, Paul said, yeah, okay, we'll come on the show, we will voice our characters, but Lisa's decision to become a vegetarian would be a permanent character change. And that was the way it stayed.
Wow, Paul McCartney. I read about you in history class. But where's your wife, Linda?
Right here, Lisa. Whenever we're in Springfield, we like to hang out in Apu's garden in the shade.
We met him in India years ago during the Maharishi days. Back then, I was known as the fifth Beatle. Sure you were, Apu.
This Week in Music History, a week in less than 10 minutes.
Grovelling and humble. In 2014, Bono announced that he was sorry after U2's latest album was automatically added to the libraries of all iTunes users around the world. I swear to God, this is the reason we now have GDPR.
Can you please never release an album on iTunes that automatically downloads to people's playlists ever again? It's really rude.
Oops. I'm sorry about that. I had this beautiful idea. I got carried away with ourselves. Artists are prone to that kind of thing.
In 1972, Creedence Clearwater Revival called it a day, following the failure of their most recent album at the time, Mardi Gras. John's brother Tom Fogerty died in September of 1990, and the surviving members have been touring as Creedence Clearwater Revisited. John Fogerty has been out on the solo trail of late, and there's pretty much only one thing that keeps him going.
Love, finding love. Yeah. And I found love. And I realized that that's the most valuable thing that for me, that I desire, and I dare say probably for everybody in the world. So worrying over all the things that went wrong that have something to do with, material things, while yes, they are important, it's not the end of the world for me, because I have what is really important. You know, every day when I wake up, I can look at her and realize that I'm a winner.
It was in 2006 that the absolutely legendary New York punk club CBGB closed its doors for the very last time. This was the place that sort of, well, I suppose the world stood up and saw all of a sudden Patti Smith, the Ramones, Blondie and Talking Heads. It was the launch pad for US punk music. Here's Clem Burke of Blondie.
What was great about CBGB was the payphone. The great thing to do, like when we were in Europe, we would call collect. You know, we reverse charges to the payphone at CBs.
Yeah.
And of course, back in the day, collect call from blah blah blah, and someone would be at the other end and pick it up and accept the charges. But because it was a payphone, no one was paying.
This Week in Music History, the podcast.
In 1973 this week, the Rolling Stones were playing in Brussels, but saxophonist Bobby Keys didn't show up for the concert, which resulted in him being banned by Mick Jagger from future tours. Now that lasted until 1989, with occasional exceptions. The story goes that Bobby missed a gig back in 73 due to him filling a hotel bathtub with Dom Perignon, the champagne, and drinking most of it with female company. It was some man, Bobby Keys.
He played sax for Elvis on Return to Sender.
Bobby's delivery is more guitar-like than any other horn man I know.
We had to find a rocker, you know, and he was the only one.
Moves, plays the saxophone in one giant swagger.
He has that looseness about the rock and roll. He knows how to roll.
In 2005 this week, Freddie Mercury's 1974 Rolls Royce Silver Shadow failed to sell at an eBay auction. Why? Well, it didn't meet its reserve price. It had been listed online by his sister, Kashmira. She had inherited the car from Freddie, and God knows he loved that car. He signed deals and all sorts went on in there, most of which we probably don't want to know about.
It was a freezing cold day and we were all there, and Freddie upstaged everybody by arriving in his brand new Roller, which we also felt he couldn't probably afford. Freddie insisted that we sign the contracts, all of us together, in the back of his Roller, because this was the first Rolls he'd ever owned.
This is a crazy story. In 1974, Al Green was taking a shower at his home in Memphis when his ex-girlfriend, Mary Woodson, burst in and poured boiling hot oil all over him. She then took her own life. Al Green suffered second-degree burns. Now here's Al on his idea of life.
Well, I don't want to feel accomplished, like I've accomplished everything and so I don't have nothing to worry about. Mm-hmm. No, you got to stay hungry all the time.
Finally, in 1989, during a gig at the Los Angeles Coliseum in California, Guns N' Roses frontman Axl Rose announced that this would be the last Guns N' Roses concert unless the band members got their shit together. He was referring to everybody else's use of heroin.
At one point, Rose slipped and fell off the stage. Then when they returned for an encore, Rose went into another tirade. Apparently very angry, he said, quote, "Unless certain people in this band start getting their act together, this is going to be the last Guns N' Roses show. I'm sick and tired of too many people in this organization dancing with Mr. Brownstone." It's a reference to a drug song on the Guns' debut album. Sources close to Guns N' Roses say the group probably will play the remaining 3 LA shows with the Stones, but they point out that the band's guitarist, Slash, has been playing erratically of late, and that after the Stones date, the future of Guns N' Roses is very much up in the air.
And that is a look at This Week in Music History. We've just hammered through October 14th to 18th, as always, in less than 10 minutes. Till the next time.
This Week in Music History, a week in less than 10 minutes.